You've probably heard this idea before, right? That people with ADHD are more creative. The thinking is that a wandering mind might be better at making these really surprising connections. But is that just a nice stereotype, or is there actually some science to back it up? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into the research and find out. So, our guide for this whole thing is a fantastic paper from the journal Personality and Individual Differences. The research team was led by Maisano and Chesebrough, who worked alongside Fenking Zhang, Brian Daly, Mark Beeman, and John Kounios. And they decided, you know what? Let's move past the stereotypes and actually put this link to the test scientifically. First things first, let's unpack this whole assumption. This idea that traits we often link with ADHD, being distractible, maybe a little impulsive, could actually be the secret ingredients to creative genius? Well, that's a question that has puzzled researchers for a long, long time. The logic kind of goes like this. If your attention is a bit leaky, as some researchers put it, you might be less filtered. And that could actually let your brain pull from a much wider net of ideas, connecting things that a more laser-focused mind might just ignore. And that, in theory, could lead to those brilliant, out-of-the-box solutions. But here's the catch. As great as that idea sounds, when scientists actually tried to find a direct, measurable link between ADHD and creative performance, the results were all over the place. Some studies found a tiny connection, others found nothing at all. The research had basically hit a wall. Until now. And this is where this new study gets really clever. They proposed a total shift in perspective. They thought, okay, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about how well people with ADHD symptoms do on creative tasks, but about how their brains get to the solution in the first place. So the researchers honed in on two totally different ways we solve problems. First, you've got analysis. That's the conscious, deliberate, step-by-step approach we're all pretty familiar with. But then there's insight. That's that sudden, out-of-nowhere aha or eureka moment where the answer just appears. Which leads to a pretty great question, right? I mean, an aha moment feels so random, so magical. How on earth do you capture that in a lab? Well, the team used a really smart and well-established experiment to basically deconstruct the whole creative process and see which path people's brains were taking. They used something called the Compound Remote Associates Task, or CRA for short. It's a classic test for a type of creativity called convergent thinking, which is all about finding a single correct answer. You get 3 words that seem totally unrelated, and your job is to find the one word that links them all together. Let's try one. If I give you the words pine, crab, and sauce, what's the connecting word? It's apple. Pineapple, crabapple, and applesauce. Now, here's the really brilliant part of the experiment. Right after you solve it, you have to report how you got the answer. Did you work it out methodically, or did the answer just pop into your head in a flash of insight? To get all their data, the researchers ran this test with 299 undergraduate students. And these students also filled out a survey to measure the level of their own ADHD symptoms. Okay, so what did they find? This is where the results get really, really fascinating and pretty much turn our expectations upside down. So, finding number 1, their main hypothesis was totally right. The participants who reported the highest ADHD symptoms, they solved way more problems using insight, that aha strategy, than they did using analysis. They were definitely leaning on a different set of mental tools. Okay, so that answers the how, but what about the how well? If people with more ADHD symptoms are using insight more often, does that actually make them better problem solvers or worse? The answer is not what you think. Just look at this graph. It's showing the total number of problems people solved correctly, and it makes this really clear U shape. The groups on the ends, the ones with the lowest ADHD symptoms and the ones with the highest symptoms, both did better than the people stuck in the middle. Why in the world would that happen? It seems completely backward, right? Well, the researchers say this U-shape is all about a trade-off between those two competing ways of solving problems. And this chart just illustrates it perfectly. Check this out. It shows that as ADHD symptoms go up, the use of those insight-based aha solutions also goes up. But at the exact same time, the use of those step-by-step analytical solutions goes down. They're moving in opposite directions. So here's the key takeaway. The people in the middle of that spectrum might be caught in a sort of cognitive no man's land.
Their brains aren't quite as effective at the super focused analysis that the low symptom group uses, but they also haven't fully leaned into that spontaneous, insight-based style of the high symptom group. They're kind of stuck between two strategies, not getting the full benefit of either one.
Ultimately, what these findings really do is ask us to reframe how we think about the brain entirely. It's about moving beyond just looking for deficits and starting to see a more complex picture of cognitive differences. So why is this a big deal? Well, for one, it helps reframe ADHD not as just a disorder with a list of problems, but as a different cognitive profile that has its own unique strengths. It points to what the paper calls affordances, potential upsides, like a brain that's basically wired for creative insight. And finally, it might just explain why all that older research was so messy. They were just counting the number of right answers, not asking how people got there. The authors themselves put it perfectly. They wrote, "Characterization of ADHD solely in terms of deficits misses the big picture. This study is really showing us that different brain wiring can equip people with different but equally powerful paths to find a solution." And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. By looking beyond just performance and digging into the actual process, these scientists uncovered a hidden strength. And it just makes you wonder, what other hidden strengths in all kinds of different minds are we just waiting to discover?